Imagine, if you will, you're living in a Stone Age hunter-gatherer society. You know, you got your people, you're huddling around a fire, you're huntering and gathering, and then one day you go to the coast and you see these strange brown small things floating in the ocean. They look like islands, but you've never seen them before. It's almost as if they kind of look like brown islands that are moving, but they have these tall white trees protruding from them, but they're moving. You don't know what they are. And then eventually they disappear off in the horizon. Strange. So your people create a sort of folklore around these strange floating island things. You dismiss it, but just for safety's sake, you retreat further into your domain, into the mountains, and isolate, just in case. Many moons and suns pass. You don't even know how many. Your children grow up and have their own children and new children, and generations pass and pass and pass. And then one day, you look up into the sky, there's a loud noise, and something shiny is flying in the sky. It sort of resembles something like a flying fish. You don't know what it is. It's a little shiny, but it's just going across the sky, gliding. Then finally one day, you're walking through the forest, and then you see what you assume looks like ghosts. Upon closer inspection, you realize they're not ghosts, but they're living, breathing beings like you. They are so pale. The only time you've seen people that pale are when they're dying, so you assume they are just walking, living corpses, like zombies. So after much deliberation with you and your brave men, you decide, let's approach these people, but very cautiously. They show you a few interesting things, like these sticks that immediately make fire. They give you this white, sticky thing that you're supposed to eat. You try it and you hate it. You spit it out, but then they add this white, sandy thing on top of it, and it makes it taste much better. Over time, you start interacting and build rapport with these strange zombie people, and it's just after all this time of your entire existence with the entire history of all your people, everything has been relatively unchanged. But today, things might start to change. And this is the story that pertains to many people across the world, because these are some of the world's oldest known ethnic groups and peoples. Let's have a Geogra talk. By the way, guys, that footage I showed is from the 1993 documentary by Jean-Pierre Dutillot. He was a Belgian guy encountering the Tulambi tribe in Papua New Guinea. There is some speculation that he may have staged some of that footage. Like, it's believed that he's not actually the first outsider to contact the Tulambi tribe. But it's a very popular documentary that people tend to use a lot for, like, uncontacted tribes. Anyway, hey everybody, I'm your host Barbs, and oh by golly gee, Jermaine Jackson with Jerry Curls. What am I wearing right here? It is a Geography Now t-shirt, of which you can get at geographynow.com. Plus, we have Geography Now mugs, all of which it's forth you can get at geographynow.com. Check out the website. Get whatever you want from the website. I don't care. It's your life. Oh, and one more thing. Just in time for the holiday season, we are selling 100 of these mini Barbs figurines. We used to sell these, but we discontinued them after the Zimbabwe episode, but we're bringing them back for a limited time. Only 100. If you did not have a chance to buy one of these, get it at figgime.com. I'm collaborating with Conrad from the Poland episode. He has a company that makes these. If you're a new subscriber, I don't really expect you to get one of these. If this is more for like the die-hard Geography Now fans that missed out on the opportunity. I mean, if you want to get one, sure, but like limited amount. Once we sell all of them, done, no more. Okay, so get one if you want. And as I always say, it is not selling out if it's your brand. Alright, so let's get into the video. So the last video I did was the world's newest ethnicities. So playing off of that, I decided, why not do the opposite? Why not talk about the world's oldest ethnicities? The world moves pretty fast. In the past few centuries, the demographical makeup of this planet has shifted drastically in almost every region of the planet. But in certain areas of the world, things have held steadfast and have barely ever changed throughout all of their known existence. And anthropologists love studying these people groups because they are some of the closest links that we have to the past. So I just want to make a few distinctions before I get into this video. So what I'm not talking about is how people all around the world have some kind of link to a Neolithic prehistoric people group, okay? We all come from that. But what I'm specifically referring to in this video are peoples that have like a genetic, linguistic, and cultural continuity that often has survived independently from outside neighboring peoples. Basically, who around this world has preserved their ancient history and culture the best? Now, just a little disclaimer, there's a lot of ancient and old ethnic groups around the world. So I'm just going to mention like the most well-known and some of the oldest in the world. But if I miss any, feel free to write them in the comments. I can't, there's too many to list, but I'm just going to go through like the most well-known ones. Feel free to write anything in the comments if I miss anything, okay? So with that, let's go to our first continent, Asia. So first off, let's go to the island of Japan. So in Japan, the majority people, Japanese, identify with Yamato peoples. These are peoples that migrated from East Asia and then settled the islands of Japan. But within Japan, specifically in the furthest northern and southern parts, namely the Hokkaido and the islands around Hokkaido, as well as the southern Ryukyu island chains, these are the oldest peoples whom inhabited historically the areas of what are now Japan. In the north, you have the Ainu peoples, whom genetically are not even at all related to the majority Yamato peoples of Japan. They were known for having more facial hair and being a little bit more kind of like stocky and strong peoples. And then you have the southern Ryukyu Islanders, whom were descended from the Jomon peoples. And now these people are Japanese citizens, but they have some of the oldest history in all of Japan, dating back somewhere between 15 to 20,000 years. Way older than the Yamato peoples. Move a little bit further to the west, we get the Veda peoples of Sri Lanka. These are some of the oldest peoples in all of Asia. They predate Indo-Aryan and Dravidian peoples in India by like tens of thousands of years, speculated around 30,000 years of history. Despite the thousands of years of South Indian Dravidian peoples inhabiting, and then later on the Sinhala peoples coming in, and then later on the Europeans colonizing, all that stuff happening, they still survived to this day. They did have their own ancient Veda language, but today it's been kind of creolized with the Sinhala language. Very few people actually speak the pure version of the Veda language. It is a critically endangered language right now, but yeah, it's not even at all related to the Indo-Aryan or Dravidian languages. It's its own thing. And in that regard, similar to them, the pre-Austronesian populations of the Southeast Asian islands are also some of the oldest people groups as well. People like Andaman Islanders, like the North Sentinelese, the Mon, the Mundas, and also other groups in the Philippines also have existed way before Austronesian groups even inhabited the islands. Very similar to the Veda peoples, they still lived in their own societies and maintained their own ways of life and to some extent their own languages. Next, if we go to North/Central Asia, we go to the Evenki/Tungustic peoples of what are now Siberia. And if you go a little further east, you reach the Chuchki/Koryak peoples. Each of these people groups still survives in Russia to this day, and they have about, give or take, 10,000-ish years of history amongst themselves. It's just they became Russian citizens, and yeah, to this day, they still hold on to their ancient identities. Now let's move on to Europe. So Europe is interesting because if you want to know what the oldest things are in Europe, you have to see what predates Indo-European language family groups. And there are a few still left in Europe. For one, in the furthest north, you have the Finnic, Lapps, and Uralic people groups. Today, they are now known as the Finnish and Estonians and Hungarians and the various Uralic peoples that are found throughout Russia. The Finnic peoples are a little bit more newer, about 6,000 to 8,000 years, but the Uralic and Sami and Lapp peoples in Lapland of what is now North Europe, they have older history, dating relatively around 10,000 years. The semi-nomadic herdsmen of the North Lapland area are, they've been keeping their ways for a long time. If you head a little further south, you reach the island of Sardinia in the Mediterranean. Sardinia is a very unique anomaly because prior to Latinization, they spoke a Nuragic language, which was not Indo-European. And although today much of the language has disappeared, there are still bits and pieces of it found in the Sardinian language, which is kind of like a Latinized Italian-ish type of language, but they still retain certain words from their ancient pre-Indo-European language. And Sardinians, they have a whole other thing apart from Italy, like they are Sardinian first before they are Italian. And then of course we get to the Greeks. Greeks do speak an Indo-European language, but Greek is like a separate, isolate branch of Indo-European that hasn't evolved into anything else. It's just kind of stuck the way it was ever since. And yeah, Greeks have about, give or take, 10,000 years estimated of history. And depending on what you consider it, the Caucasus region, it's kind of like the transition zone between Europe and Asia, whatever you want to consider it. They have some of the oldest people groups that have isolate languages, such as the Kartvelians, which are today evolved into what are now Georgians, the Circassians, and even though they do speak an Indo-European language, it is also an isolate, just like Greek. The Armenians, they are some of the oldest peoples in the Caucasus region. A genetic study published in 2017 showed that the mitochondrial genomes of 52 ancient skeletons basins from present-day Armenia span at least around 7,800 to about 8,000 years. So it is speculated they are some of the oldest peoples in that area. But then we get to probably the most famous and notable one, the Basque peoples. They are one of the oldest continuous cultures in all of Europe, speculated to have roots that age back down to the Bronze Age, that straddle an area of what is now between Spain and France. The Basque language is one of the most unique anomalies in all of Europe because it is not Indo-European and they have kept and maintained it for so long. It has no other relatives. It's its own isolate, and today they have their own unique customs and culture and language, and they've just always been Basque. They've never been truly Spanish or French. They've always just been the Basque people. Now let's move over to the Americas, North and South America. Now this is an interesting one because if you look at the demographical trends of North and South America, the peoples migrated from the land bridge of Beringia, of what is now Russia, over into what is now Alaska, and then migrated southwards. But here's the thing, you would think the peoples closest to the land bridge would be the oldest ones. No, it's actually the opposite. When people crossed over into the American continent, they moved fast. They went down south as fast as possible. So what you have here is a strange situation in which the people further south are actually older than the ones in the north. But in terms of an actual continuous preserved ancient culture, some of the oldest ones are speculated to be the Mesoamericans, speculated to have been around for about 18,000 years, which are now, evolved into the modern iteration of like the Mayan peoples. Although the civilizations emerged about 3,000 to 5,000 years ago. I believe the oldest one are the Olmecs. If you go to South America, you have the Quechua and Aymara peoples, as well as the various Amazonian groups. They are believed to have a preserved ancient culture that spans back about 10,000 years. Then you also have the Na-Dene peoples, or the Athabascans, which actually migrated from the northern areas further south down to what is now Navajo and Apache territories of Arizona and New Mexico. It is speculated their history spans back about 10 to 12,000 years. But if you go further north, the Inuit/Yupik peoples of the Arctic, they have an earlier history, only spanning about 5 to 10,000 years. So it's interesting. The further south you go in the Americas, the older it gets, and then the further north, the younger it gets. Yeah, kind of interesting how that happens. Now we go to the African continent, which has some of the oldest people groups that we know of. Now let's go to North Africa. Although they are relatively more newer, they are some of the oldest groups that have maintained their ancient culture. First, we get to the Berbers/Amazigh. Basically, they're just synonyms of each other. It's just Amazigh is the word that they use for themselves. The Amazigh are the oldest peoples in North Africa, inhabiting various regions of coastal Mediterranean/inland Saharan Africa. They are about 10,000 years of their known ancient preservational history. Their languages way predate anything else in the area. And North Africa, it's the Amazigh peoples. When we go to East Africa, the most well-preserved ancient peoples are the Nilotic and Cushitic peoples. Nilotic people groups have a language that spans all across what is now Central Saharan, mostly in Chad, all the way down to the Nile River Valley, whereas Cushitic peoples live mostly in what is East Africa. They have their own Cushitic language groups. But if you want to get the oldest peoples in Africa, you have to head further south to the central and southern parts of the continent. First of all, in Tanzania, they have the Hadza and Sandawe peoples. These are a very unique isolate peoples that aren't really related to anybody else. Like, they used to think that these people were related to the Khoisan peoples because they have they have click sounds in their languages, but that genetic studies have shown they are not related. And in that regard, there's also the San and Khoisan and San Bushman peoples of what are now Southern Africa. They mostly inhabit the areas of like the Kalahari Desert in South Africa and Botswana, all that stuff. And then you get to the various Central African pygmy groups, although they also go by like Central African forest hunter-gatherer people groups or forest peoples. I actually met a few of them when I was in the Central African Republic. They said they don't mind the term pygmy because it's kind of like a broad umbrella term for all the related people groups of the Central African forest regions. You've probably heard of them. They come in many different groups, mostly like 3 linguistic families, the Mbenga, the Mbuti, and Twa peoples. It is speculated that these peoples' ancient history spans about 20,000 years, and the San Bushmen and the Khoisan peoples, it seems to be speculated that theirs goes back about 30,000 years. Oldest in Africa. That's what you got to know, okay? So here's where you think the story would end, because you would probably assume that the oldest known preserved ancient culture culture would probably be in Africa because, you know, like the African migration theory and all that stuff. But it's actually not. Believe it or not, the oldest known continuously preserved ancient culture that we know of today is actually in Oceania, specifically in Australia. The Aboriginal Australian community, or the native indigenous Australians, have a continuous culture that anthropologists speculate has a history spanning somewhere around 40 to 60,000 years. And the Papuans and Melanesians are not far behind, about 40 to 50,000 years. Archaeological evidence shows that humans have inhabited Australia, predating the Neolithic Revolution, and predates the settlement of most of the rest of the world outside of Africa, with some sites like the Majibebe area suggesting possibly 65,000 years. Can you believe that? Predating Neolithic Revolution times. Like, we're talking about like Stone Age. It's so crazy because like these people knew how to handle the continent. Like, they had every single possible way to survive and thrive. If you guys know Australia, like, it is a naturally hostile environment, and these people studied and knew exactly how to get by with everything, like every poisonous animal, every way to hunt, everything to eat, everything to avoid eating. Like, these people knew the continent. Props to native Australians, man. So there you go. Those are some of, not all of, but some of the most well-known and oldest peoples on earth that have maintained and held on to their ancient ways, even amidst modernization. And I mean, this world has been ever rapidly changing throughout the past few centuries, but sometimes amidst all of that rapid fire change, some things just don't change, and some things just hold on to the way that they were. And sometimes it's okay to hold on to the past, because the past is what made us today, and we owe it to the past. And you can't learn how to move forward if you don't know what the past is. So cheers! Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something. Stay cool, stay tuned.